Hello again, everybody. It's Takedown. We continue our coverage of the sport. This time we go full circle. The book, Full Circle, by Tim Foley. He joins us now from his home in Chicago, Illinois. You're on the Western Loop. Is that true, Tim?
Yeah, I'm in the West Loop. If you've ever been to the United Center, I'm on the road that leads to the United Center.
Ah, on the road to the United Center. Well, how apropos is that when the book you have written is a book about unifying the sport of wrestling? Talk to us about Full Circle, the origin of this book. Basically, it was the 209 days that united the world and saved an Olympic sport. Your description.
Yeah, exactly. So, start off, it's a coffee table book. It kind of looks at the process that the wrestling community undertook in order to get the sport reestablished. There's an excellent book by Craig Sesker and Jamie Moffat that talks a little bit about the insider baseball that went on at FILA and USA Wrestling. This is more of a book that sort of complements the movement, the grassroots movement, and sort of the larger international movement that it took to reinstate the sport. And it came about because, as you know, I was on the road helping provide media coverage of some of the events that previously hadn't been covered by FILA. So I spent, a good amount of time, I'd say about 200,000 air miles between April and September, helping to provide some coverage and just some extra press for the Save Olympic Wrestling movement. So I took that information, some of my photos, interviews, notes, and combined them with photographers' work from around the world, and we collected into this book. And it was it was a pretty massive undertaking, but at the end of the day, I think it created a really nice product and something that I think that the wrestling community deserves in light of its effort.
In light of its efforts, indeed. T.R. Foley, our guest, Full Circle, the name of the book. It's an up close history of wrestling's Olympic level fight for its rightful place in the Olympics. Tim, is it the rightful place, or is that an arrogant look? Is that what got us in trouble in the first place?
I mean, I think that anybody who sort of looks at it from the sense of rightfulness is looking at it from a historical perspective. So in that sense, I think it is sort of correct. I mean, it's a founding sport. You don't often see founding sports eliminated from what they help facilitate. But in sense of being a good partner to the International Olympic Committee, who is our primary and only partner in the Olympic movement, I don't think that wrestling did an adequate job of sustaining governance and institutional policies that afforded it the opportunity to not just survive at the International Olympic Committee, but to excel. And I think in that term, wrestling was a huge failure. It didn't follow through on the principles that the IOC asked, and so therefore it was sort of justly eliminated.
Were you, on February 12th, a little over a year ago, were you surprised, shocked, dismayed? What was your initial reaction when you heard that wrestling had been recommended for elimination from the games?
So right, this is sort of like the wrestling community's Kennedy assassination moment, right? Where were you? There's a lot of people who obviously have their stories. I had actually just come back from India. I'm still now currently writing a book about what wrestling means to the world, and I'm delving into different cultures, their traditional wrestling styles, what wrestling means to them. And I just come back from India. I just had this amazing experience wrestling in the shadow of the Taj Mahal, this Kushti wrestling event. And I came back and I'd flown to Singapore, where I was in the midst of a 36-hour layover in Singapore, staying at a buddy's apartment, and I had fallen ill with like the worst case of food poisoning. Anybody who's been to India knows what I'm talking about. And so I had 104-degree fever and was not exactly my right self. And then this news came in over Twitter and Facebook, and as a writer, I was being asked to sort of give hot takes and responses, and I was like, I can't get out of bed. I got a fever, and it was truly a disastrous moment for me. And I felt, that though clinically I wasn't able to respond immediately, it gave me a little bit of extra time to not just blurt out the first thing, which I wanted to say, which was, middle finger to the IOC. So it gave me a couple more days. But yeah, that's where I was. I was actually in Singapore, February 12th, and I kind of knew that this was going to be a big thing. But I think at the time, like everybody else, I felt considerably. I felt helpless. I felt considerably helpless.
The sport itself, and I should say the coverage of the sport at times, seems like it's flailing away in the dark, talking only to itself. The world was was awoke, if you will, or awakened with this news, and we got support from a surprising number of people at a number of different levels, or a wide variety of levels, from business to industry to sport. Did that surprise you?
I think it did. It surprised me only in the sense that I had never sort of constructed how this would all go down. I mean, nobody ever thought this was a possibility. But once you sort of look at it, and in retrospect, it seems obvious. I mean, wrestling's a fundamental aspect of the human experience. And anybody who's ever grabbed their brother or been tackled by their uncle understands the physicality of the sport, the control, and the nonviolent nature. So I think and then obviously it's part of the Olympic movement. So I think when it was eliminated, it not only became a rallying cry of people within the community, but people who were sport purists and also politicians. They're never afraid to get onto something that's popular, get onto a campaign that's popular. So I think it built steam, and I think the arguments against the sport being in the Olympics were so bureaucratic, and that it was difficult for a lot of fans to see that. So no one was really going to take the opposing view, since it was a difficult argument to construct to the layperson. But it was surprising. I think one of the most interesting things I've heard recently is I was in Krasnoyarsk, Siberia, for the Ivan Yurigan Golden Grand Prix, and I was watching practices, and Satia Busayar had told the coach that I was with, actually Aaron Pico's coach, Valentin Kalika. He told Kalika that the Save Olympic Wrestling campaign was the single greatest publicity event for wrestling in Russia. He said that his school where he was learning, or where he was teaching at the time in Krasnoyarsk, was Mendiashvili, and that school in Mendiashvili and his new school in Havskirt, in the Caucasus in Havskirt, both experienced like 200% increase in wrestling, in numbers of wrestlers that were coming into the building. Boys, girls, ethnic minorities, you name it. Everybody was coming in to wrestle because there was a spotlight put on the sport, and it was receiving so much attention. So he saw it as like, a $15 million international PR campaign for the sport.
And it was just that. It was the biggest campaign that we've seen from any sport, really. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's the largest reinstatement campaign in the history of the Olympics, of course. And as far as any instatement campaign, I mean, I don't know how much money squash has put forward, but over the last 3 Olympic cycles. But I think that the influx of capital for wrestling will likely be unmatched.
Were you surprised when wrestling was voted back in, and Jacques Rogue made the public pronouncement? Were you surprised, or were you fairly confident up to that point?
So right, yeah. I mean, I was actually in Buenos Aires at the time. I was in the media room covering the event, and I think we were having some Twitter discussions between Alan Abrahamson of Three Wire Sports and some other guys, and they were like, "Oh, don't be worried. This is a done deal. There's no way they're going to keep it out." And at that point, by September 8th, it was. I think by all accounts, it was sort of a done deal. But that moment when it switched from being a I think some people, there was no defining moment when it went from, are we going to get back in, to, oh, we're obviously going to get back in. And as anybody who's ever wrestled a match, you wrestle through the whole 3 periods. You doubt yourself until the whistle blows. You go whistle to whistle, you get the job done. So I think sitting there, and I was with the chief of staff, Wes Battle, or CPAL chief of staff, Wes Battle. I mean, yeah, nothing's ever certain. The sport got eliminated in the first place. Nothing's ever certain. We're sitting in the media room, and when the announcement came through, we both just started sobbing. Just uncontrollably sobbing. And a Japanese film crew came up to us and was like, "Why are you guys so excited?" It's like, well, it's been a long time. It's been a long 4 or 5 months.
It truly was. T.R. Foley, our guest, is the author of the new book, Full Circle, which is an up close history of wrestling's epic fight for Olympic reinstatement. Obviously, the sport has been reinstated and changes have taken place. And that leads us to our next line of questions, I think, and at least the opinions of Tim Foley. He travels the world. Have we done enough? Are we on the right track? Do we need to do more? We've taken some significant steps, Tim, at the international level, both here in the States and around the world. Have we done enough?
Have we? No, we haven't done enough. it's not even close to enough until you have a sport that's as presentable and easy to access as any professional sport that you witness on a weekend basis. I don't think it's ever enough. And I think even when you get to that point, there's always a refinement that needs to take place. I think that one thing the wrestling community is now certain of is that complacency is our enemy, and that there's no point at which you are satisfied. And whether it's the media operations for the national wrestling federations, USA Wrestling or Iranian Wrestling, or if it's FILA itself, there's no amount of work that can be done that's going to ever sort of eliminate the need for improvement. That said, there's obviously been major improvements, and more on the way. I think one of the things that's lost in this is not the National Football League. This is not Major League Baseball. This is an international governing body with 177 governing bodies which have voices in a large constituency, in a large FILA bureau. And as you know, and as anybody knows, anytime you get international figures together, you have cultural differences to overcome, and you have bureaucratic sort of setbacks that are always popping up. And being that the situation happened in September, there was obviously a lull right after the event, people taking vacation essentially, and then you had Christmas, and so you had this sort of setback. But as far as FILA is concerned, they have their first round of like, all right, we really need to get some things changed. That meeting's happening early March in Rome, and that'll give everybody a better indication as to what is going to be the future of the sport. And then, of course, and this is more political stuff, bureaucratic stuff, but the elections for new FILA bureau members, there's been 2 that have passed away, another that's been suspended. That's all, and the presidency for Mr. Nenad Lalovic, that'll be up in September at the World Championships in Tashkent. So there's a lot of political aspect to running this sports organization that doesn't necessarily exist in what we see as popularized American sports.
And as much as there seems to be movement behind the scenes, publicly at least, there is a hue and cry out there. Some speak louder than others, and I'll bring up Wade Chalice, for example. He seems to have a lot of questions about what USA Wrestling is doing to help lead the charge for change and unify the sport. There seems to be some questions out there. Is USA Wrestling doing enough or all that it can, or is it on track? Better yet, is it on track?
Yeah, I think it's really easy, and I've been this guy before, and I probably am guilty of doing it sometimes when I sort of analyze wrestlers. It's really easy to sit back and say, do this and do that. Well, money is a finite resource, and money is what drives a lot of the ability of any organization to commit to its goals. USA Wrestling has had a large influx of money, but what you see on a daily basis is what comes out of their communications department. Gary Abbott, Craig Sesker, Richard Emmel. These guys, especially in my experience, just having spent as much time with Gary as I can, I don't know that anybody understands how hard a guy like Gary Abbott works. So while the institution may be in need of something, American wrestling, in my opinion, USA Wrestling is one of the best run national wrestling federations. I can't think of a better run national wrestling federation. They have a large staff, they have committed coaches, they have professionals. I'm a professional staff. And while I know that there's always critics, and like I said, you can't be complacent, I think hats off to these guys. Like, this organization does a lot better job than most people probably realize. People don't realize how bad it could be. And they can always find a benchmark that USA Wrestling hasn't quite met, but and so criticism is fair, but at the same time, after having seen them up close, having criticized them before, and then having seen them up close, I can tell you that there's a lot of really hard-working, dedicated people, from Bender to Ravenak to you name it. These guys, 100% are talented and they're committed. So I would disagree with Wade Chalice on some of his wider points.
And I'll ask it a different way.
Yeah.
From journalist to journalist, is there room for improvement? Are we standing in the way of our own success?
In what terms? You mean journalists being in our own way?
From journalist to journalist, is USA Wrestling standing in its own way?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure I understand the question necessarily,
well,
but
in the interest of of getting down to it, the idea of saving one's own house sometimes when a fire is at one end, you start putting water on the other end. Are we putting water on the fire where it needs to be put? Can we do more? Or better yet, what can we do to help USA Wrestling do a better job?
I think continuing to support their initiatives and continuing to support things like the World Cup and pop-up events like you'll see in New York and other places are huge. And I think adding to their publicity, getting excited about the sport, telling them, giving them feedback, positive and negative, saying, hey, when you guys did this highlight video, that was awesome. That was really, really cool. I want to see more of that. I think having a balanced response is always sort of best. I mean, it's difficult to take someone seriously with all they do is criticize. So I think giving them a balanced perspective would be helpful, both as journalists and as, any fan.
Excellent answer. It is difficult to take someone serious when it is nothing but negative, 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 and instead of coming to the table with only problems, isn't it interesting that someone would come to the table with solutions? I like that.
I mean, Scott, this is exactly what happened to me. I wasn't part of this movement in April. I was sitting back and I was absolutely hammering my keyboard and hammering Fila, and this whole thing for me started on April 18th. I think it was April 18th, 16th. There was a Senior Asian Championships, second largest continental championship, really important event to those people who are involved in it. And the sport is enormous on the continent of Asia. And there was no Fila coverage, there was no Fila whatever. So I just got on a plane. I got a one-way ticket to India. I had a buddy who lived there, and that's when I just started writing about. I covered the event and said, if someone wants to pay me for this and help me recoup my costs, that would be amazing. But in the meantime, we need to show. I moved from a perspective of just filing complaints and just filing my bullshit opinions to what I thought was providing a good for the movement, for the sport. Because whether I like it or not, I love wrestling more than anything else. I love it more than, whatever. It's my number one goal. It's just not just to save wrestling, but to enjoy it, to love it, to make it better, and everything else comes secondary to that. My loyalty is to the sport and to the people in the community. My loyalty is not to, whatever, necessarily being, not journalist, but always making sure that the number one thing that I do is add value to the sport. So that's the way that I've always looked at it. And so when I made that decision, it was, it wasn't hard. It was like, look, I can do this and I can do my part. And the thing is, that's what I did, but there's 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, 2 million other wrestlers around the world who did, to varying degrees, the same thing that I did. They made choices, they made sacrifices, they supported their national wrestling federations, they supported the sport. And that's what I think something like the book can show a little bit of.
We're talking with T.R. Foley, otherwise known as Tim Foley, from his home in Chicago, downtown Chicago, the Western Loop, on the way to the United Center. Coincidentally enough, we're talking to him about his new book. It's called Full Circle, and this is a fascinating coffee table look with some very sharp images. The book available online through the ordering process of Amazon.com. You can also find a link at intermatwrestle.com. That, of course, where you find an awful lot of Tim's work, where he shares his changing is that you have a desire to be a part of the sport more than just a casual observer or a fan. You want to be a part of the solution, and isn't that the greatest challenge?
Yeah, I missed a little bit part of that because we had a little malfunction on my end. So if you could just repeat that question, I apologize.
Basically, being a fan, a super fan, if you will, but being a fan and then a casual observer, I think you're striving to be more than that. You're striving to at least provide responses, answers, and solutions to the perceived or real problems the sport faces.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be the only marker for sort of honesty and or for analysis. I think I was fortunate that my that column, my Friday column, has done so well. I've been really fortunate in that I have a readership that's willing to engage in discussion. So I have a better indication, I think, sometimes of what people from around the country are concerned about and thinking about because they contact me with their questions. But you know, as you said, like, and I think you're much the same way. I think at the heart of it, we just want to see the sport be better. We want to serve our community and be a good member of the community. It's really important to us to see the sport grow, to see the sport healthy, to see the sport receive the attention it deserves.
Let's switch gears for a moment if we can. It was this last weekend that Jordan Burroughs' streak of 69 consecutive wins was broken, and it was at the hands of Nick Maribel, former Missouri Tiger. What was your opinion of that 69 consecutive wins, the fact that he lost, good or bad, for Jordan on an international level? Does that serve to wake you up? You're a wrestler of note as well during your time, and you've literally wrestled around the world. What did that streak mean, and what did the win by Nick Maribel mean?
So I think the streak meant three things. First of all, from an institutional level, it's amazing that USA Wrestling kept track of the streak. I think. I mean, I think we look at how do we improve the sport. We just have this long discussion about it. Well, yeah, I mean, look at Carell in 13 years, but we have no idea. The Wrestling Federation asked him several times; they have no idea how many matches he won. Hundreds of hundreds, but we don't know. The same goes for Yasser Dogu. The same thing goes for, which is actually coincidentally the name of the event that they were at. Yasser Dogu, Medved, a lot of guys had winning streaks that lasted 3, 4, 5 years. Satiev, although his were shorter than you might think. And so first of all, yeah, having a sort of an account of that streak, and that's a good publicity tool. I mean, that's something that USA Wrestling has used to their advantage to grab attention for Jordan and make him arguably the most popular wrestler in the world. Second is, does it affect Jordan? How does it affect Jordan Burroughs? The guy was going to lose. Doesn't matter when. He was going to lose. The sport doesn't allow for perfection in any way. I know Cale Sanderson was perfect in college, but he lost his red shirt. I mean, there's lots of sort of caveats, and nobody's perfect, and that just proves it. I mean, I think everybody knew it was going to happen, and I think it's least surprising to me that it happened to a teammate. And technically speaking, Maribel was sort of the right matchup. I don't think that was at all surprising that Maribel was the guy to do it. I mean, maybe actually that it was Maribel and not Dake, but just that it was an American. And then lastly, I think also that the third thing is I think it's just a huge weight off of his shoulders. I mean, one of the things is we tend to equate great wrestlers with great sort of emotional stability or an ability to transcend nerves. And I think anyone who's watched Jordan closely before he wrestles, he's a pot of nerves. And I think that having that streak on his mind probably only added to that and added to his sort of pre-match nerves. I think the Jordan Burroughs we're going to see now is one that's going to be a little bit more open when he wrestles. And if I'm a 74 kilogram wrestler, that's a little disturbing to me. I think that's a little. I think honestly, I think this is somebody who's got by with 2 moves. I mean, he's got a plethora of moves. The guy's brilliant, but he was utilized 2 moves, 3 moves, effectively and continuously, much like John Smith would do. I'm going to shoot the low single. John Smith shoots the low single. Jordan Burroughs going to hit a double. He's going to hit a double. Now you're really sort of messing with somebody who has the potential to do a hell of a lot more. So I think it's great. And I think and honestly, I think it gives everybody reflection to sit back and say, like, you know what, 69 straight matches, that's pretty incredible. Like
69, and indeed incredible, but is it more important, the win more important to Nick Maribel, or is the loss more important to Jordan Burroughs? And I know that may be a backwards question, but I think there's your answer.
Well, I mean, I don't think Nick Maribel's going to hang his whole career on that. It didn't work for Larry Owings. It didn't work for anybody else. You don't hang your whole career on one win. I don't think Nick Maribel's goal was to beat Jordan Burroughs. I think Nick Maribel's goal is to make a world team, to medal at the Worlds, to make the Olympic team, to win the Olympic gold medal. I think his goals are probably more directed towards that. In order to get to his goals, he needs to beat Jordan Burroughs. So yeah, this is a first step for him. He knows what's possible. But yeah, I think in terms of actual like what it does for each wrestler, we have yet to tell. But I would suspect that it would benefit Jordan a lot to not just to let go of this winning streak and being undefeated, but just also to head into to just to be a better version of what he already was on the mat. And I think this is going to open him up, and I think this is going to teach him an important lesson.
Our guest, T.R. Foley, you know him as Tim Foley, perhaps, respected author, journalist in the sport of wrestling. Let's go back to your book, if we can, as we head down the home stretch here. By the way, the LA World Cup, are you looking forward to it, the LA version of the World Cup?
Yeah, I'll tell anybody who listens, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm only going to make this Sunday because I have a wedding that committed to on Saturday. It's an important event. So I'm actually flying in Sunday morning from Florida on the red eye. So I don't even know if that's a red eye. I don't know what they call that, but
Sunday morning.
Sunday morning. Yeah, Sunday morning post wedding into the World Cup. That's how much I'm obsessed with wrestling at this point. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think that America has got its work cut out for it. Russia is doing okay. Their upper weights are a little slow, but I think they're going to bring in this new the guy who beat Phil Keddy at 86 kilograms, Soldayev, I think is his name. Yeah. He was a cadet world champion. My prediction is this guy is probably going to have a Burroughs-like career. I've never seen a more dominating upper weight, to be honest with you, at the end. And he's 17. So, if he comes, I think that's going to be really exciting. But, Russia, Iran, the Americans, India is really looking strong. And the Mongolians their lower weights are just on fire right now. They're winning back-to-back titles at major international tournaments. Indians as well. And then I think we have the Armenians, the Ukrainians. So there's going to be a really good mix. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. The Georgians.
Azerbaijan. Do you think, and project out if you can, do you think India will be the prevailing story out of this year's World Cup?
Yeah, I think we're going to see them in a dual meet as well. I think outside of the World Cup, but I don't think so. I think they'll win some matches and upset some people, but I don't think they have the top to bottom quality yet to win a dual meet setting like this. They won the senior Asians last year, but that was a lot of the Iranians put a lot of their backups at the Asian championships. But they have the ability. They do. They wrestle so hard. Like they get criticized for not practicing as hard, but they wrestle really hard. And I think that they could. Of course, they could be a story. Yeah, of course, absolutely. I think it'll be more this kid from Russia if he shows up. I'm not sure if he will. And I think it'll be who we wrestle at 74 kilograms, and that kind of stuff will be a lot of the story as well.
All right, T.R. Foley, our guest. Tim, if you would, please tell us who some of the photographers are, the work that appears in your new book. I think it's important to recognize our photographers are certain people that have an eye.
Right.
And it's amazing, some of the
photographs. It is not easy to photograph wrestling.
No, it is not.
It's not easy. Because you have to get faces. There are a lot of cool moves and stuff, but unless you get a face involved, you're just looking at a spandex butt, and it's not always as appealing as you might imagine. So, I think first and foremost, I got to thank Tony Rotundo. He's just a really good guy, and he's sort of a valued member of our community. And in his not just his photography, but his oversight on the entire project and sort of the technical needs of each photograph that we use and how big can it be and the quality that we want. I think it was essential in helping put together the book. I think also Cliff Fretwell, who well, this guy is he's like a mad genius of creativity, and I think his cover design is what most people look at when they think of the book at this point. That's what you got, and he did just such an incredible job webbing together visually what we were trying to say over the course of 112 pages. So I think he did a really good job. I think we had sort of the common slate of what you would see in wrestling photographers: Larry Slater, John Sachs, these guys who covered these events, week in and week out, and don't really get all the respect that they deserve. We had a guy named Alexander Orechnov from Russia. He does all the photos from Wrestling Russia, who is sort of captured a lot of the really big moments. And then we had a guy from Iran, actually, Amir Pourmand, who just put together just some absolutely just the photos you think of when you think of the Save Olympic Wrestling movement. I think he took the one with Ahmadinejad and Zeke Jones sort of standing there in a big group with Jordan Burroughs and everybody else around him. He just did a fantastic job, and I'm missing certain people, but we probably had about 20 photographers put their work forward, and we paid them and the whole thing. So it was a really special group of photographers, and definitely super thankful for their efforts.
I think the people in the State Department called that one shot with Ahmadinejad, I think they called that evidence.
Yeah,
It
right.
really was. Tim Foley has been our guest. The book is Full Circle, and it is an incredible tribute to not just the athletes and coaches, but the fans and those that serve our sport around the world. It's the type of tribute that belongs on your table, belongs in your collection. TR, tell people how best to get this book.
I mean, you can go on Amazon and you just sort of put into the search bar Full Circle Foley if you want to add. But also you can go to my website, trfoley.com/full circle, and it'll have a direct link to the marketplace. Sort of the people who publish the book will also send it out. And that's a pretty direct way to do it. Otherwise, you have to depend on my ability to ship a book. And you don't want to do that with my travel schedule. So go to either site, Amazon or Atlas Books Marketplace, which again you can find the link at trfoley.com/full circle. So either of those two places you can get the books, and then also I'll be, anytime you see me, obviously you can grab a book. I'll have some on me usually, and if not, I can send you one when I get home.
Heavy is the backpack that TR Foley will be wielding. My goodness sakes, that's quite a commitment, sir.
Yeah,
That's a lot of books. That's a
a
big
lot of books.
backpack.
Yeah.
TR, we got to do this once. We certainly more than once every couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I always have a great time, and you're an excellent host. I really appreciate your hospitality.
It's always good to talk to you. Tim Foley has been our guest from his home downtown Chicago, and again, the name of the book is Full Circle. It's about the epic fight that many in the world of sport waged to make sure that wrestling retained its position, its place, if you will, in the Olympic sport, in the Olympic offering. Our guest, again, TR Foley. I'm Scott Casper, and thanks for watching.
Thanks, Scott.